Hey guys, my name is Chenya San or Christine. I'm your classmate from Finance and Investing 442, Fall 2021. Today I'm going to present my under contract research essay to you guys on the topic of hedge fund and the basic risk management of them. You can access my entire paper among references on Canvas under the general discussion form. So let's get started. The financial market is like a Caribbean Sea, which is rich and resourceful. It has various funds, bond, stock, all kinds of securities, and hedge fund is one of them. So hedge fund is kind of similar to the mutual fund. The main difference between hedge fund and mutual fund is that the hedge fund is not regulated by SEC. And because it is not regulated by SEC, you can see hedge fund as a more free and private form of mutual fund. Hedge fund cannot market themselves. That is why you never see ad for hedge fund, but you can see ad for mutual fund everywhere. When I say free, I mean the investment strategy is more free. And when I say private, I mean the private placement. Private placement means it is not sold through public offering. Remember I said they cannot market themselves? Rather, it's sold through private offering, mostly to small number of chosen investors. And generally, these investors can be your friends, your families, credit investors, and institutional investors. In other words, you had to be in the union, you had to be in the social group, and you had to be a creditor. Another feature of hedge fund is it is high leverage. High leverage means the hedge fund can go to the bank to lend even more money to invest so they can earn more money like a snowball. Until today, hedge funds have received great attention from global investors and have become one of the mainstream investments in fund market. However, because hedge funds are highly leveraged, more risk, right? Investors should consider carefully before deciding whether or not ride on this ship. So, what is hedge fund? First, we need to investigate the plain meaning behind the word hedge. Hedge is also known as hedging. It has two main meanings: arbitrage and offset. Arbitrage is to profit from the difference between the price fluctuations of two assets by constructing a new asset's position to offset the price risk of an existing asset's position. Arbitrage is also commonly used in currency exchange. In this example, cryptocurrency. Offset is to make transactions in the future market with the same types and same quantities of commodities, securities, whatever, anything, as in the security market, but in the opposite directions, to offset the price fluctuations in the security market. And because of the characteristic of hedge fund is flexibility, is privacy, and also the investment strategy, there's no uniform definition of hedge fund. Although I have pulled out a Google definition of hedge fund. So through my research, I have concluded a formula that can be summarized what hedge fund is. That is the investment theory plus investment strategy plus investment leverage and fund brokers equals hedge fund. Let's talk about more about the leverage. So leverage is the excess part of actual capital that investor put it in. Leverage potential increase your profit, but also put a great risk in your investment. So greater the leverage, the greater the risk. Overall, you're going to ask, so what hedge fund can do? There are mainly three functions that hedge fund can do. Number one, hedge fund can improve the efficiency of the financial market, and it can predict. This is important. It can predict the future market trend. Two, hedge fund can increase the liquidity of the financial market and bear the market risk. Number three, hedge funds operations can reflect the deficit of the financial market and the financial system. The history of hedge fund can be roughly divided into these following phases. The first is the generation phase, then slow development phase, the golden phase, and the full-scale development phase, and the phase after 2008. The first phase is 1949 to 1970. On January 1, 1949, Alfred Jahn opened the world's first hedge fund. Hedge fund is germinating, is blooming, but the economic crisis of 1970 led to the collapse of a large numbers of hedge funds. The second stage, which is 1970 to 1986. During this period, hedge funds began to use leverage to invest, and the investment risk increased. Many hedge fund firms began to restructure and improve their management to adapt the industrial change. The third phase is the golden phase, which is 1986 to 2000. On this phrase, I'm going to mention three important hedge funds. They are macro hedge fund, quantum hedge fund, and the tiger hedge fund. The macro hedge fund developed greatly during this period and began to enter the global financial market. In 1992, the quantum hedge fund defeated the Bank of England, forcing the British pound, which is the British currency, out of the European monetary system. In 2000, Tiger Fund announced its closure, marking the end of the golden age of macro hedge fund. This is super fun because today you can still find the original news articles of Tiger Hedge Fund announcement on ABC News website. After 2000, hedge fund entered full-scale development phase. Hedge fund in Europe, in Japan, and all over the world globally had a great development. In 2008, we all know what happened. The mortgage bubble broke out in US, leading to global financial crisis, which had a great negative impact on hedge fund. The financial crisis caused about two-thirds of hedge funds to be bankrupt. Hedge funds' funding sources have shrunk significantly. Institutional investors lost a lot of money in the crisis and reduced their investment. Therefore, since 2008, the growth of hedge funds has been limited by increased regulations. For example, US and UK adopt a short selling restriction policy to increase the regulation of hedge funds. Now let's talk about some unstable factors of hedge fund. First, hedge fund cannot obtain accurate expected return because of some bias. There are selection bias, backfill bias, and survivorship bias. Second, the performance of hedge fund is constantly changing because of the beta, and the correlation between hedge funds' return are constantly changing. The third is the standard deviation does not fully reflect the risk of hedge funds. Since hedge funds' performance reporting is voluntarily, and the selection bias is often the better performing hedge fund firm will be stand out and speaks more, and the average or lower performance firms may wait until they're performing better then speak out. This selective bias is also known as self-reporting bias, which can create a misleading illusion that hedge funds firms have high return and low risk. Investors may invest more money in hedge fund company due to the incomplete information they gather. The backfill bias is when hedge funds report its performance to a hedge fund index. The people who make the index at the hedge funds past the history performance to their current index, so it's averaged out. So studies have shown that backfill performance is significantly higher than the average performance of this hedge fund industry as a whole. In other words, backfill performance pull up the overall hedge fund's performance level higher, which can make hedge funds return looks puffering like more. And this is also misleading to investors to make their decisions. The survivorship bias is when hedge funds company goes into liquidation or their performance went poorly, the company often choose to stop providing their performance to the hedge fund index. In other words, hedge fund index as a reference indicator for investor investing in hedge fund and not fully reflect the potential loss and the risk like it involves. On a stat perspective, the standard deviation does not fully reflect the risk of hedge fund because for some reason using standard deviation to analyze the risk is often inefficient. The probability distribution of some hedge funds, of most of hedge funds, have characteristic of life skill. And this is unfavorable characteristic for investors is mainly because the risk of long and short position held by hedge funds firms do not have to be matched. In addition, hedge funds with small standard deviations and high Sharpe ratios tend to have this characteristic to the determinant of investors. Therefore, constructing an optimal portfolio using the expected variance it's important to see the skewness and the shape of hedge funds that data to see their returns in order to avoid investing too much money into hedge funds. Distinguish the type of hedge fund when before investing them is important because you're gonna know what risk are you going to take on. There are many types of hedge funds to choose on, including macro funds, long funds, short fund, market neutral fund, emerging market fund, fixed income fund, and merger arbitrage fund, and funds of funds, and there's so on. Each types of fund have their own characteristic in terms of risk and return. Before purchasing a hedge fund, the investor should clearly understand the fund's characteristic and consider the fund's impact on the overall portfolio. Now let's talk about the funds of funds. It's also known as FOF. This is a great hedge fund option to investing on. The funds of funds invest the funds that rate in other hedge fund companies. Funds of funds have some advantage that general hedge funds do not have, which including the risk diversification, and the complete detailed research on the fund company they invested in. These advantages are very attractive to small and medium-sized investors. Funds of funds typically invest in 15 to 20 hedge fund companies, so it's like a pool of hedge funds together. However, because funds of funds also charge management fee, it directly increases the cost of investor. Typically, FOF charge 1% manage fee, service fee, and 10% performance commissions. And the other thing is because of the diversification of FOF, it performance the return is at the average level of like compared to other hedge fund companies. It provides while reducing it reduce the risk rather than increase the return, so it is a conservative choice. Here is a overall summary of my research paper and my today's presentation. Thank you all for your time today, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and have a great day.